Grab your favorite caffeinated beverage and get cozy because you are listening to Mindful as a Mother with Paige Bruce and Lindsay Adams.
Do you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily and then distribute it everywhere and even earn money. All in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today, like me, right now. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, my creativity with Mindful as a Mother is through the roof. And I like having options like Q&A and polls, so that way I can bring my creativity to another level. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hey everyone, Lindsay and I are very excited to announce that we are currently prepping a brand new video series. This series is for the parents frustrated by navigating the emotional roller coaster of their children. So many times we hear my kid goes from 0 to 60 so quick, there's nothing I can do and I'm not sure how to handle it. Well, this video series is for you. We're going to walk through what it is to have this type of emotional experience and when to offer compassion, connection, and support. We're also going to walk you through skills to teach yourself and your children to help you manage these emotions. If you want to be the first to know when this comes out, very soon, check out the link in our show notes to sign up for that newsletter. Thanks, guys.
This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for therapy or the therapeutic relationship, and the information given in this podcast is purely for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the advice of a professional. Hello and welcome back to Mindful as a Mother. My name is Lindsay and I'm here with
Paige. Hi, guys.
And today we are talking about how to help your children recognize what tasks affect their energy levels, or how you can also recognize it in your children.
Yeah.
So this is the kids. It's about the kids.
It's about the babies.
And if you haven't listened to the first 2 episodes on this subject, that's going to be really important. So press pause, go back to the first episode on this and listen to that one, and then the second, and then come back here.
Yes. That will really help you build the awareness for yourself, because we really need you to have an understanding of what it is before you can start to identify those types of behaviors and energy drainers for your kids.
And I'm going to talk about the different categories that tasks and energy drainers, rechargers go into, just as a quick recap. But for the full detail, you'll have to go back to the first episode. So red are the things that we use malicious motivation or emotional motivation for. This is like the things we end up in fight or flight pretty much to get done. Mm-hmm. Green are the things that they are fun and they are refreshing and they charge our battery. Yellow is the stuff that's boring and has like no emotionality attached to it, like dishes, laundry, doing your documentation. Blue are the things that can be recharging in moderation, napping, binging Netflix, and scrolling on your phone. But if it's taken too far, it can make it harder to motivate yourself later. Let's just dive right in and and talk about how these things show up in kids, because in our kids, we recognize the state they are in based on their behavior. So, what are some ways you can tell that your child is in red or using red to motivate?
So one of them happened this week, actually.
Yeah.
And I had asked my 8-year-old to do something, and she was just like kind of flitting around, getting distracted, knowing it's not something she likes, putting away laundry. Mm-hmm. And so I recognized, like, I gave it some time. I recognized that she was getting distracted. I was like, hey, do you remember what I asked you to do? And so then she immediately went from 0 to 100. Mm-hmm. I went, ugh, fine, mother. And it's the first time she ever called me mother. And so I'm sorry, the audio on that might be rough, but it was the first time she ever called me mother in her entire 8 years. And so that kind of tickled me a little bit, but I didn't laugh or anything because then she would have been really mad. But she like was procrastinating it, and then that was the kind of like pop off there, and then she went and did it. But she was mad the whole time.
Yeah. I get this with Sam a lot too. It's like when you ask them to do something, it's that like anger, and he'll go, oh, fine. That's what he's like, oh, fine. And that's his way of like, he's like, and some of it as I think expressing, I don't want to do this and you're making me do this. I think this is where we see a lot of like the fight response in kids and the power struggle. So if your child is power struggling with you a lot about doing a task, whether it's homework, whether it's chores, anything that they don't really enjoy doing, because remember, these are the boring things that we use high emotionality for. And these are often the things that we need in life, you know.
I would definitely say fight. At this point, we are on fight. I have one kiddo that doesn't do fight necessarily, but it's like high emotional reactivity.
Well, and the fight like can be turned inward as well. So it's like fighting yourself. Like, I'm so dumb. I'm so stupid. I'm not any good at this. Why am I going to do it anyway? The other piece, the disclaimer I kind of want to add to this when we're talking about kids is if you have a kiddo that has that pathological demand avoidance aspect, right? This, and if your kid has it, you probably know what it means, but that is where expectations and demands, whether as simple as, hey, can you put your shoes on, trigger a feeling of a loss of autonomy, which then sends them into fight or flight. And there are kids, and this is a spectrum as well, that have like extreme levels of it, or some that just have a little bit of it. And I definitely see it in myself and my kiddos a little bit. And so this, they can go into red really easily, I feel like, because it becomes, any demand becomes a red.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah.
So when we're talking the different colors, the yellow, I really, in our family, I feel like yellow, which are the boring tasks that we feel like are going to take forever. We're not interested in doing them. We're not motivated. Yeah. This is where our motivation barriers are really found. Red is where we're using high emotionality, whether that's like self-shaming and spiraling or anger, to get stuff done. So in the yellow, I'm thinking like, that's when I'm getting the power struggles without the fight. That's when I'm getting the like having to remind you multiple times. That's where I'm getting the pushback. That's where I'm getting the deliberate defiance.
It's the avoidance.
Is in the yellow.
I also want to point out, as a parent and as parents, this is where our parenting style and like being a responsive and aware parent is really important, because how many parents, and I've even done this, when your child is in the yellow, you use the red to motivate them by saying something like, you go pick up your room right now or we're not going swimming. Right. Like, so you use that emotion, their emotional attachment to something. I'm taking away your iPad. Whatever threats we use as parents. And I say we because when I am in the red, I will fall into this very quickly with my kids, and then I'll have to like step it back. But we probably unconsciously teach our kids to motivate themselves in this way in our parenting.
Yeah, I 100% agree, where we accidentally encourage the malicious motivation. Because it's like...
And that's... it's because that's the way we were parented. That's the way we motivate ourselves. It works. You know what I mean? And so there's no... And that's the reason I said unconsciously. We're not aware we're doing it. And I operate from the belief that most parents, if they're doing something that is quote unquote like harmful or unhealthy, for the most part, they don't know that they're doing it.
Yeah. That's exactly the paradigm I work from, the general belief that I work from also.
Yeah.
And I think I see it a lot too, like when we're talking tweens, teens, because we're trying to reinforce that there are actual consequences for you doing stuff. Like, you're not turning in your homework. And I think sometimes that can present as like your teacher's going to be mad that you waited so long to turn it in, right? So now we're using that moral character judgment, that attack on the self-esteem, as an emotionality motivator for them to get the assignment done and get it turned in.
Yeah, and I think that it's tricky because with this specific group of kiddos, we know that they are harder to motivate because of that dopamine deficiency. And so we, as a parent, sometimes we just do what we feel like needs to be done to get them to do the thing. And so that's where it gets really hard to be. And that's why people say, well, this parenting technique doesn't work on my neurodivergent kid. And it's like, no, it's not that it doesn't work. It just needs to be applied differently and understood from a different perspective, because it is harder to motivate them.
Yeah. So when we're talking like clean your room or we're not going to go swimming, right? We're attaching emotionality to motivate them to complete something. So we're pushing them into the red. How do we, as parents, differentiate a consequence? Like, this is just a consequence, versus like I'm pushing them into emotionality as a motivator.
So for me, I believe that consequences should be established ahead of time and when you are calm, right? Like, and there's certain times where that's not really possible, and they should be like a natural consequence. So I would not, this is what I would say is like, okay, the whole family's cleaning right now, and I know you don't want to clean your room and it's hard to get started. So what can I do to help you get started? The other thing with like room cleaning that needs to be taken into consideration, this is why neurodivergent kids are so hard, guys, is because it's like, do they have the actual skill set to go clean their room on their own? Right? Like, is that a thing?
That's a whole other extra thing.
And so if they genuinely do, they have the skill set, they've done it on their independently like 10 times, then okay, they do have the skill set. But there are different days when they may need different levels of support to do things. And it's okay to let go of that. So for me, it's like, okay, if clean, and the way I structure my life for my kids is that when we're doing tasks, we're doing them as a family, so that that body doubling piece really comes in. We're all cleaning, and I'm the floater, so I like go help the kids. So if it's a hard day, it's like, okay, I'll come sit in your room with you. Or with my girls the other day, they were having a really hard time picking up their room, and they were fighting with each other, and it was like using red to motivate. So Tim just went and laid on their bed and was like, hey, do this first, then do this first. And that helped them so much, because they just needed someone in there with them.
Yeah, to body double, and then to piece it out.
And to be a support. Yeah. So I think just like being really aware of this and how it shows up in our kids. So back to your question. I would say, I would be like, would you like me to get started with you? Would you like me to tell you what to do first? What do we need to make this happen? And say we're going swimming directly after, I would say, I wouldn't take swimming away, but I would say, I'm really excited to go swimming, and I know that you are too. And I hope that we can get this finished really quickly so we can go swimming. So it's not like emotionally loaded in the way of like, it's going to disappear, but it's like, that is still there. And it's a natural consequence of not getting our family chore time done, is that we don't have as much time to swim.
Yeah, that there will be less time versus I am the power and authority and I'm taking it, which I think helps with the pathological demand avoidance also.
Yeah.
Because the whole ideal is that you are the authority removing autonomy.
Yeah.
I had a situation with my 8-year-old the other day. And I can't remember what we were fighting about, but we were on a full-on power struggle over her, I think it was some kind of part of her evening routine. Anyway, so she's fighting with me back and forth, and I'm engaging in the power struggle. Like, I'm fighting back. I'm trying to get her to do things. I'm like, you won't. Oh, it was brush her hair. It was brushing her hair. She has long hair. She does not like the sensory experience of brushing it, but she also doesn't want to cut it. And she's old enough to brush it on her own, but she did not want to do any part of her bedtime routine. Teeth, hair, none of it. And we do it regularly all the time. So I know she has the ability to do it independently. So anyways, I'm not sure what happened, but we just got so wrapped up in it that I was like, okay, for everything you don't finish of your bedtime routine, you owe me $1, because this is my time that I'm taking to remind you to do it. And I should be compensated for my time, right? I was like trying to figure out how to make it like make sense. So we're in this power struggle. She's just like screaming at me and being really mad or whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to stand by it then. So we get to where I'm like, hey, I told you you had until 8:30. It's 8:30 now. It's time for you to get in bed. What isn't done? And like, you have to pay me for that. So she was really upset about having to pay me the money and like do all these things. And I think it's because I took away her device. Like, she was using a device, and I was like, well, it's time to get ready for bed, even though you have more screen time technically on the device. Anyway, so I don't know what to do. Very defeated. She's screaming and crying, like, send her to bed. She gave me her money and was like really mad about it, like all the things. She's like, "You're stealing from me," and I was like, "Well, you're not wrong." But also, I'm trying to make a point here, right? Mm-hmm. So I just like dug my heels in. Okay, she goes to bed. We both have a little bit of time to calm down. And so she comes out and she was like, "I'm sorry that I acted that way," which we've built up a lot to get to this point. Mm-hmm. But I acknowledged that and I was like, "Thank you so much. I feel like it was really responsible for you to come out and apologize and like share with me and your feelings." And she did a great job articulating. And what she really wanted to do was stay up late with her dad after her sisters went to bed. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, "Mom, I really wanted to stay up late with Dad." And she was using her device. I took it away. So that's why she immediately was like, "Well, I'm not going to do anything you want me to do." We get into this power struggle. She's like, "I really wanted to stay up late with Dad. And I think because of my behavior that I probably need to go to bed instead." And we've talked about this before in another episode. And I was like, "I think that is an appropriate consequence." And then she said, "I think I also shouldn't use my device for 3 days." I was like, "Okay, I think that's an appropriate consequence." And so I apologized to her for my interactions. And then I gave her back her money. And I said, "I think the consequence that you've decided on is more appropriate than taking your money. And so I'd like to give this back to you." Mm-hmm. So that's just an example, I think, from my own life and parenting where I was caught up in the red. Like, we have to get all these things done. We need to get these things done. Hyper-focused on that part of it. And she's fighting me with it. And so I went to like something that she has a emotion, like she's very passionate about because she works very hard to earn her money. And so she was very upset about it. So I was trying to leverage her connection with like something she cared about that she had worked really hard for to get her to do the thing that I needed her to do. Mm-hmm. And in the end, that wasn't the most like appropriate or logical consequence.
Yeah, and I think it's so hard because in the moment we're just looking for something to motivate them. And it's not, we're not meaning to do it in this way. And it is so nuanced and so tricky that sometimes, and I just want to normalize, we're going to mess it up. Like even like Paige and I fuck it up sometimes. I fuck it up a lot. Like, and I have to step it back and be like, whoa, like where did that come from? Like, and some of it is so unconscious. It just like comes out of your mouth and you're like, oh, okay, well that's not.
Yeah. So I feel like this is a very real example where I'm like, I didn't know what to do. So I was just doing whatever I could in the moment and winging it. But also the power of coming back later to repair and correct.
And to talk it through, right? Like, I think we don't need to talk it through in the moment when we're in red because no one's talking. It's just a power struggle. But coming back later and talking through it so you can be more aware in the future. And she can be more aware in the future of where she's coming from as well.
Yes. And then we were both calm. So then now there is an established consequence. So I do now ask her when she isn't following directions or isn't getting the thing done or like intentionally telling me no to the thing. I ask, "So what do you feel like would be an appropriate consequence if this doesn't get done?" And it's like, okay, each scenario is different. But when I know we're moving into this like yellow, I'm like, what is an appropriate consequence if this doesn't get done?
So much of parenting for me and in helping other people, I've recognized the same thing when it comes to motivation, when it comes to emotionality. And this isn't just for neurodivergent kiddos. It's for any kiddo, but it's even more important because things escalate so quickly with neurodivergent kiddos, is recognizing that it's going to be an issue before it's an actual issue. Yes. Right. So like we've talked in our previous episodes about how yellow tasks then become our red tasks, right? Yes. Like, so recognizing that, so if your child is struggling, maybe like you have a teen or tween that's struggling with turning in assignments, really, and not staying on top of it from like a punitive, you can have no missing assignments kind of way, but in a, how can we motivate you in a way that's positive before it becomes this red power struggle, whether you're like attacking yourself or attacking others, or I'm using emotionality to motivate you.
Yeah. And bringing up examples in the past, I think is really powerful, especially when we're talking tweens and teens, because one of the best, and this is true for neurodivergent kids, one of the best learning modalities is watching peers or like similar aged individuals or examples from their own previous experience as those learning opportunities, like having them modeled. There was a bunch of studies done on autistic children watching videos of their peers doing so, like interpreting social cues and socially appropriate behaviors, and how much they had learned from that. And I thought that was really interesting. That came out in COVID. But I use that a lot. And so what I call it is third person, third place historical parallel, which means we can use, like, Lily is an 8-year-old girl in 2nd grade, and she didn't want to do her bedtime routine. And this is what happened when she didn't do her bedtime routine. Mm-hmm. Like, how can we get this done so what happens to you, Lily, doesn't happen to you too?
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's something that is used commonly in, like, the therapy practice for emotions as well. Like, kids place their emotions, or they'll share their emotions through characters or through their stories. Mm-hmm. That's why play therapy is so important. Yeah. But it's easier to mm-hmm. connect with that sometimes, and because I think the awareness, it's unconscious for them, right? The awareness isn't there about mm-hmm. themselves yet.
Yes, which is why we talked about how important it is that you become aware, because you can start at any age. This is something that really blew up on our TikTok. If y'all don't know, we're on TikTok as Mindful as a Mother. But one of them was that, like, emotional regulation is not a developmental milestone. Like, emotional intelligence, you can start at any age, which is why we have adults who are now building the self-awareness. You and I included, late diagnosed, mm-hmm. like, not sure what happened in our whole lives, mm-hmm. but, like, we are now building the awareness mm-hmm. and the toolbox and the skills to be able to work through this. And now we can see it in our children mm-hmm. and also support them. And so even with our teens and tweens, pulling examples of last quarter, when you had this assignment and it didn't get turned in, this is what happened to your grade and this is how you felt. Or when you were waiting till the last minute to turn in, this is what happened, and then this is how it impacted, like, your friends and yourself and everyone in our family. Like that's what it was. We don't want that to happen, right? Like, filling those in.
The most common thing I see with, like, teens and tweens, I hate the word tween, but I don't have another word for it.
It's the in-between.
Preteen,
okay.
Is that they will, especially specifically neurodivergent ones, is that they will they'll be in yellow mm-hmm. for, like, the whole semester, whole quarter.
Oh yeah.
And then they will have so much to catch up on that they will feel overwhelmed, and they will try and sprint in red mm-hmm. through the end of the quarter. Sometimes they'll pull it off, sometimes they won't, but then they end up in blue. Mm-hmm. And which is like overly blue, like freeze, burnout type situation.
Self-shaming, because even if you did get it turned in, now you feel shame about the quality or what didn't get done.
Or sometimes we perpetuate this as parents by saying, we know that our child did this, and we say, well, you shouldn't have waited till the last minute, which obviously, but then, you only got a C, and then we harp on him about the C. And it's like, instead of saying, like, I'm really proud of, like, how you pulled it out at the end of the semester, but, like, let's remember this. Let's do something so that this doesn't happen again, because it's really hard when you're overwhelmed to catch up, right? Like, mm-hmm. and so this comes back to, like, approaching things from a place of curiosity with our kids rather than, like, judgment or, like, emotionality on our part.
Yes. And there's a book called Growing Up Mindful by Dr. Christopher Willard, which I've talked about a few times on our podcast. And he talks about the studies behind approaching things with curiosity and how it turns off the fight or flight response, like it slips you into a parasympathetic state. And so there's less reactivity when you're able to just approach something with curiosity, which makes you more self-aware and also more aware, like, relationally, of the people around you outside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about green and blue for kids. So blue specifically for neurodivergent kids. Screens can be like a thing that's blue for them. Mm-hmm. And every brain reacts differently to screens and screen time. And that's why I think that there's no hard and fast rule on, like, what screen usage should look like. Like, the parent needs to be able to, like, look at the environment and situation and navigate what the boundaries should be there. But that sometimes I think screens are very calming, and parents use that, but then the time gets extended or it gets to be too much, and then it ends up not being a calming thing. And it's harder to then get off of them.
Yeah. And I see this in my own life when we allow our kids, because like I'm in probably like a lethargic blue state, so I'm watching something like all day, and so I'm letting my kids watch something all day. And then here's something I notice of their behaviors is at the end of the day, even though we've been awake all day, we have all of this loaded energy that has never been expended. And so it's like, oh, that's 8-10 hours worth of energy that we have not allowed to move out of your body.
The other thing I've noticed is with my kids specifically, watching a movie or show on a TV has way less impact than watching something on a tablet. I don't know why. It's got to do with the blue lights. There's probably like a scientific explanation for this. And also the introduction or non-introduction of YouTube. So if I have tablets and I let them watch shows on it or play games or even playing on the Switch, but the second for some reason YouTube Kids is involved, there's always an issue.
Yeah, immediately. Something about YouTube.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's lots of people who believe they're subliminal messaging programming our kids or whatever, and maybe they are. Yeah. But I just think, and that's where it's been so hard for me, because it's something my kids really like and really want to watch, and we've been trying to find ways to include that and make them know that their wants and needs are important, but also this can't be good for you. Yeah. So we watch actually on the TV. So I have YouTube Kids as an app on the TV, and if there's a certain channel they want to watch, we sit and we watch it together as a family. Yeah. And they each pick a video, and we do the family time that way. So that there's that exposure to YouTube. We do go through phases where sometimes maybe I'll download it on the iPad for a little bit and then I delete it. But I just want to give you the permission to be ever changing in that, and it doesn't have to be hard and fast. And to see how your child responds and where they're at. Something I tell myself as a parent is I can always pull back on it. Always. And that's not just YouTube. So, for example, with Layla, I know that she's neurodivergent. So I know that her brain works differently. It's much easier to become addicted to those things that are going to give you immediate dopamine releases, right? So kind of providing training wheels and step-by-step skill learning is kind of what we're doing together with this. So that way this blue activity doesn't end up harming her or us. And so I got her, we call it an iPod, even though iPods don't exist anymore technically. It's an iPhone 7 that doesn't have any service, and I have it locked down on all the parental controls. So there's no service, and it's only on my Wi-Fi, and there's only apps that I allow on it can be downloaded. It's all these restrictions and passwords and things. Apple has done a really good job on making sure that if you know that the controls are there, you have access to them as a parent. So what they have gotten a lot better, because Apple used to be a nightmare. Unhinged, yeah. But it's I set a specific age range on even the apps that she's allowed to search, and she's not even allowed to request me to download them because it's not within her age range, and then I can review everything. So anyway, so that's a big part of it. But with this, I was okay, I'm going to give this to her, and this is going to be training wheels for us, and I can always remove it if it's too much right now. But what I wanted was, I also knew to eventually she'll have a phone we all do, but I want her to have healthy boundaries and etc. around it, especially with how her brain works. So we have set up certain things. So I set a screen time limit a day, and it's only an hour a day, period. She has to request extra. All of the apps get shut down other than, I think, Spotify Kids. I let her keep Spotify Kids for her night stories and things. So it's only an hour a day, and she's aware of what the limit is. And then we have limits around day of time of day use. So we have to take care of all of our responsibilities first before we can use it. And that's in the morning and in the evening. It's not at night, it goes into mom and dad's room to charge for the night. It's not something we have access to after bedtime. We put it away at a certain time before we go to sleep, even if we have time left in that 1 hour a day. So all of these are little tiny steps that I feel are supporting her
neurodivergence because we're piecing it out of like, we're going to sit here and do this for a long time till we learn these healthy habits, like bit by bit within the development.
Yeah. And that's so good because it's so easy to get sucked into that. The other thing I want to, this has nothing to do with being in blue, but it just came to me, is when a child is in red, I like to offer as much autonomy as possible. And this is anytime a child is heightened emotionally, because it can feel very out of control. So if they're struggling and they're like emotional about it, so it's like, would you like to pick up your laundry first or pick up your toys first? And like that little bit of like feeling like they're in control can be really helpful in shifting from more of like a red to more of like a healthy motivation. So I just wanted to include that before I forgot.
Yeah. And unpacking that as a parent, because it's like, I might want them to take a bath right now, and this is what we get a lot. I'm like, okay, go get in the bath. It's time to start our bedtime routine. Oh, can I do it in 15 minutes? So then I'm like, okay, my underlying belief that I was raised with is, I asked you to do it, you need to do it now. Okay. But then the thing that I challenge it with is, will 15 minutes make that much of a difference? Like, can I allot for that amount of autonomy without it having consequences? And typically it's a yes. So it's really like catching yourself too as a parent of like, okay, I'm reparenting myself in this way. Like, yes, I asked you to get in the bath. You asked me for 15 minutes. And typically what I ask myself is like, is there a good reason to say no? And if not, then I say, sure, that sounds good, in 15 minutes. But then in 15 minutes, we really follow through. It's not like in 15 more, and then 15 more, and 15 more. So like, that's a whole other debacle there. But it's like, it's choosing like how to examine those underlying beliefs.
Yeah. And that can be tricky. And there can still be like, say you give the autonomy and then there's still pushback. That can be difficult for parents. Like, why did I give the autonomy in the first place? And that's where you have to mentally unpack. Like, you're not giving the autonomy as a way to avoid the pushback, because you're going to get the pushback either way. Like, it's just might be part of it. But it's a way to work on, maybe avoiding that pushback or keeping them out of the red when they are doing the task, right? Like, yeah. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work, because the goal is not for them. And this, you got to unpack this. Talk to your therapist. The goal is not for your kids to just listen and obey.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to your therapist about that one. But let's talk about green.
Yes, green.
What about it?
So I was thinking about green, and I'm like, oh, I know what lights me up as a human, and like what I really enjoy and what helps me feel hopeful and energized. Like, how can I see that in my kids?
Music. My kids love music. Love it. Like, they light up, they dance around, like, and these are the things too that I think that like I see them in their most pure joy states in. Those are their green things.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
You can tell what things are green for your kids by what they repeatedly ask for too. So like one day, and it can change daily, but one day I had Rory and we were at my office and she was playing with the toys in my playroom, and she said, Mom, can we go home and will you play a game with me?
Ooh.
And I was like, oh, okay. Like, yes. So that let me know that quality time with her was a green activity for her. Right? Or things that I feel like really light them up, like reading books is one. Me reading to them is one. Listening to music and dancing is another one.
Crafts.
So crafts. So
Science
the things that they like willingly want to do and like ask to do, and you can hear it by kind of what they say, is one of the things I was thinking, which is really hard. But so it's like Rory was like, will you go home and play this game with me? Like, she has this unlimited playroom of toys that she never gets to see, and then asked to go back to our house and play a game with me. I was like, okay, like quality time is green for her.
And once you know that, you can work that into their schedule. And so like if you see them in the red a lot, you can use those green activities to help motivate them. So like for teenagers, I think friends are a great green opportunity. And this is where it gets tricky, because you don't want to take friends away, but you also want to like structure the time and energy with friends, or sports if they have a sport that they really love and care about, or another extracurricular, so that it can be helpful in motivating them and recognizing that like our kids need green time,
Yes.
regardless of what their behavior looks like or what their grades are or any of those things, right? Because I think some parents, their first reaction is, well, to motivate them, I'm taking everything away. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences, but like it's really hard to motivate an unmotivated person when their bucket is not being filled with activities that fill them up. Like how easy would it be for you if someone said you cannot do anything until you do this thing that is really hard for you to do?
It probably wouldn't motivate me to actually get the thing done. I would just be in the red, like angry and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of what it is for our kids. I think another red trap we fall into as parents is the not wanting our kids to miss out on stuff. So signing them up for all of the activities, when in reality, that is making them like, go, go, go. We're at school all day being stimulated and learning. And then we're in aftercare. And then we're doing this sport. And then we're at this game. And then it's like, well, we're pushing them into that really busy lifestyle, which is ultimately draining, and they're not getting any kind of recharge.
Yeah, and like I did a TikTok on this week, but like your sensory system is like going to be burnt out. So we went camping this past weekend, and it's a lot for my kids. It's a lot of like interaction, a lot of energy, a lot of sun, a lot of social situations, not enough sleep, all the things, right? Or like going on vacation is like this. We came back and I told my babysitter, even this is like a low expectation day. Like I took everything like that was not absolutely necessary. Like really it was like they will brush their teeth today and that was it. Like, you know what I mean? They will eat meals, they will brush their teeth, and they can like watch movies, they can go play outside if they want, but like really it's not going to be a busy go day. And they needed that day to recharge from all of like being go. So it's not that you can't do these fun things, it's that you have to do it in a way that supports your specific child. And that may mean like, say you go to Disneyland, right? And maybe 3 back-to-back days at Disneyland is not going to be good for your neurodivergent child, but maybe you go one day and then you take an off day. And like you give them the day in between to just like hang at the hotel or whatever to like recharge before the level of stimulation again.
Yeah. Or let's say you went 3 days back to back and it was good, and we still need that downtime afterwards.
Yeah. So you come home and you build it into your home schedule.
Because there's going to be times in life when we are really in this red, this like the demands and the productivity or the event, etc., is going to be a high demand for a short period of time. It's about interweaving the green and the blue so you can continue to support them. And that's like basic needs, like you said. And this is true for adults too. Like, am I getting at least 8 hours of sleep? Am I taking care of my physical needs? Do I need to go to the bathroom? Do I need to drink water? Do I need to eat? And these are a couple things that even Tamara Rosier talks about in the book, is doing check-ins, morning check-in, midday check-in, evening check-in. Like in the middle of the day, she would set an alarm for herself to just check in on, I know this is a red week for me because there's just a lot of high demand. And so midday, am I taking care of those basic needs? Like, do I have to go to the bathroom? Because like sometimes that's the thing where I'm like, I haven't eaten all day, right?
Yeah, and I think just being, and it requires a lot of attunement, which is a word we use a lot, being connected to our kids, aware of their patterns, and presence. And that can be really difficult if you don't have this down yourself. So when you are taking care of yourself, when you are structuring your schedule in this way yourself and your tasks, then you are in a place where you emotionally have the energy to be attuned and respond to your kids. Yeah. And so if you're struggling with that, like I would recommend taking a step back, working on yourself so that you have the capacity to be attuned and support your kids in this.
Yeah, to teach them the same skills. One thing I really appreciate about the Solvay grid is the overall mindset shift that you don't have to do anything to deserve rest and recharge. It should naturally be part of a built-in schedule for you and your children. And I was raised in a life that was like, you need to prove your worth. You need to be productive. You need to achieve. And I really value being able to teach to my children that part of achieving is also like achieving rest, achieving joy, like having fulfillment outside of productivity.
And I think our society as a whole is moving in that direction, so it makes it easier to unpack, because I think we become conditioned to those beliefs on multiple levels, whether it's through like education, social media, our parents, all of those things, and really taking a step back and saying, is this what is best for me and my child, or am I doing this because I feel like I should or I need to earn rest?
Yeah.
Okay, well, see you next week.
Thanks for coming to Mindful as a Mother podcast. If you'd like more of us and Mindful as a Mother, you can find Paige at Instagram at Parenting with Paige and Lindsay at Linz_Adams LCSW. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and in our Facebook group, Creating Community and Smashing Parental Stigma, Embracing Mindful Motherhood and Positive Parenting. Thanks so much, and see you next time.